So what exactly did Edgar Cayce predict that Robert Schoch confirmed on Joe Rogan?
That there's something going on with the weathering and erosion on the Sphinx. The second observation, this is within the first 2 minutes at most, was that the head is too small for the body. The head is not eroded the way the core body is. It's not eroded the way the walls of the Sphinx enclosure are. It's not the original head.
Storehouse or record house, where the records are still to be uncovered, there is a chamber or passage from the right forepaw to this entrance.
So you think there's something underneath there?
Oh, I know there's something underneath.
If this was a Dan Brown novel, the general location of the records couldn't be more obvious. The idea that there is a chamber underneath a paw in the center mass of the world, that's pretty astounding.
Listen, it's not an exaggeration to say that we are sitting ducks in a cosmic shooting gallery. Exactly.
Another interesting fact is that if you were to believe the Hopi legends, Sotuknang, one of the Hopi's prime creator god, appeared before those chosen people who still remembered the creator and his plan, and told them that the doors at the tops of their heads would lead them to safety before he destroyed the world. They followed his indication and took refuge underground with the Ant people as the first world was destroyed by fire. So as you can see, the Hopis were led to an underground cave, and it seems that according to the legends that they weren't the ones who had engineered a vast network of tunnels and caves. If that was the case, I doubt the Hopi Indians would refer to the Ant people as friends. But let's try to be logical for a second here. Why would the Hopi Indians, people generally adapted at living on natural terrain, carve out an entire underground complex and then mention that they were not the ones who did it? And even if the Hopi Indians were making this up, what are the chances that this made-up legend would also match actual underground caves found in Turkey that not only astonish archaeologists in its complexity, but also happens to be associated with the legend of a long winter, just as is mentioned with the legends from the Hopi Indians? And to top it off, for the initiated UFO buffs, you will also know that the Anunnaki in Sumerian language translates to the sky gods, or more specifically, descendants of the gods of the heavens. Now, if you haven't heard, the Hopi word for ants is Anu, whereas the Hopi word for friend is Naki, meaning Anunnaki literally translates to ant friend in Hopi language. And to think that the Hopi Indians already have a myth of ant people helping them survive multiple catastrophes, which could have only been brought about from a higher intelligence than themselves. Whew. So, going back to Edgar Cayce's prediction that the Great Pyramid was built from 10,490 BC to 10,390 BC. Now, according to phys.org, researchers claim to have uncovered evidence of a cosmic impact at the younger Dryas boundary. When examining samples from Greenland ice sheets, they found that platinum concentrations increased by about 100 times approximately 12,900 years ago. Meaning, the Great Pyramid of Giza, according to Edgar Cayce, was built only a few generations after the timeline of the impact. That's 400 years to be exact. This also implies that the Great Pyramid of Giza was supposedly built in the middle of the 1,000-year-long cold spell between the beginning and the end of the Younger Dryas. Now, interestingly enough, the legends that were passed down from the Egyptian priests to Solon, the ancestor of Plato, mentions that the Egyptian hieroglyphic writings were meant to be placed in earthquake and fireproof stones, so that the history of humanity would not be erased by the multiple cataclysms that have been already taken place on Earth. In other words, the ancient mythologies from Egypt, as told by Solon, talks about multiple cataclysms just as the Hopi Indians mentioned in their mythology. Now, if you consider the possibility that the Great Pyramid was built after the first true cataclysms, the fire and the ice as mentioned by the Hopi Indians, but before the Great Deluge, then Edgar Cayce's date actually matches up very precisely. To add to these astonishing coincidences, researchers like Graham Hancock have also demonstrated that around the time of 10,500 BC, which is only 10 years before Edgar Cayce claimed the pyramids were built, that the Sphinx actually faces the Leo constellation perfectly, not to mention that the Milky Way also aligns perfectly with the path of the Nile River. Now, could all of this just be coincidence? Now, many of you may be thinking that Edgar Cayce is just a psychic. and there's no proof his readings are real. Well, you may be amazed to discover that as I was writing this episode, I actually ran into a reading I had never heard of.
How was this particular Great Pyramid of Giza built?
By the use of those forces in nature as make for iron to swim, stone floats in the air in the same manner. This will be discovered in 1958.
Oh, I love it when psychics give exact dates because it actually gives us a chance to nail down the truthfulness of their predictions. So let's think. Forces that make iron swim. Could this mean that iron becomes liquefied? Well, if so, then you may be already thinking of the infamous top secret experiment called the Philadelphia Experiment. If you haven't heard, let's listen in for a second.
July 1943 in Philadelphia Naval Yard, the experiment is said to go forward. Powerful electromagnetic fields are engaged around the Eldridge, a skeleton crew aboard. Scientists and officers watching at a safe distance. The only other reported eyewitness is Carlos Allende, a deckhand on a nearby Liberty ship.
And what he claims he saw was a ship that was engulfed in a greenish, almost a St. Elmo's fire, a green fiery fog.
Throughout this miraculous journey, the USS Eldridge emerges unscathed. But for her crew, it is a different story.
Men were molecularly attached to the ship, bonded with the ship as it was teleported. Men were driven insane, men caught fire, men went invisible. I mean, it is terrible, horrific things that happened to these crew members.
As we continue, the nightmare that follows and the alleged cover-up.
Their family was never told the truth. They were told basically that they were lost at sea during the war as part of the war effort, which is, of course, a very plausible answer.
So as you can see, this experiment seemed to be capable of liquefying solid iron with the use of electromagnetic as the main force. There was also a somewhat controversial character, John Hutchison, who also claimed to be able to liquefy metals with electromagnetic forces. Now, what really shocked me the most, however, was when I searched Google for famous scientific discoveries in 1958, the exact date that Edgar Cacey provides, well, this is what I got. Now mind you, Cacey gave his readings in July 1st, 1932, 26 years before a magnetosphere was discovered surrounding Earth. Also, I have never heard of this reading until I made this episode. So everything that was just verified just now was done so independent of the aid or information of others. Ironically enough, Michio Kaku, one of the most respected physicists of his field, mentions in his book, Physics of the Impossible, that repelling against Earth's magnetosphere will be one of the breakaway technologies discovered by future civilizations attempting to conquer levitation. I even discovered a post in a physics forum asking if the Back to the Future hoverboard is actually viable. And sure enough, the physicist that answered the post agrees that Earth's magnetosphere with superconductivity can be used as a repellent to conquer gravity so long as it's done not near Earth's equator. Okay, so now I'm starting to get a bit of the chills. So it appears that something dramatic happened around the same time that the Atlanteans met their demise at the same time that the mini ice age ended. Now, according to the Dogon legends and the Egyptian legends, much of the knowledge that was imported to those cultures actually came from the survivors of the Atlantean civilization itself. You almost have to believe the Dogon people when in the 1920s they were already relaying the concept that the Sirius star system, which they claimed was the home of their ancestors, had not 2 but 3 stars. Not only that, but they also mentioned that the 3rd star was highly dense, even though the star cannot be seen with a telescope. Now, despite relaying this information in the 1920s, it wasn't until 1994 that scientists began postulating that due to the observed solar perturbations that were taking place in the Sirius star system, what they thought was a binary star system is actually a trinary star system, with the 3rd star being a highly dense but not very luminant white dwarf. For skeptics out there, I would argue that this is a form of scientific confirmation because very specific knowledge was given that can be correlated with other texts from other cultures, such as Egyptians, who also worshipped the Sirius star that was later validated scientifically. Now, there is one detail that we have not clarified, which is when the Hopi Indians first talked about the world being burned by fire and then another world engulfed by ice, are they referring to the same events, or was this two separate events? This is a difficult question to parcel out, but according to the Greenland Ice Core records, there seem to be at least 3 almost instant temperature spikes within a relatively short period between 15,000 BC and 10,000 BC. So definitely, well within the time period of the Native American habitation in Americas, there seem to have been more than one event that occurred. In fact, 3, possibly. Are these events correlated with one another? I would say maybe. I would actually surmise that the number of cataclysms in such a short time period could imply a bigger catalyst, such as a celestial event, possibly still poorly understood by the mainstream scientists. I can already see the Nibiru fanatics pressing the like buttons on this video. I just wanted to end by saying I understand episodes like these can be very heavy, almost burdensome at times to listen to. But let's also remember how long it's taken for modern humans to gather enough information to finally create a small crease, just a crack in the huge door of lost human history. If for thousands of years, some of our ancestors were restrained to caves with saber-toothed tigers lurking on the outside, and if in other periods people built unfathomably big monument structures just to preserve our history, perhaps putting a little effort to understand what few have understood before is not such a bad proposition. Now, if you did like this video, I definitely recommend that you subscribe and make sure to put the notification on because we're going to have a few follow-up episodes related to the same topics. So thanks again for sticking with me. This is Felipe Osorio, signing out.